Sorry to interrupt you. We're going to cut across you, Hind, as well, because President Trump has now arrived inside the Great Hall of the People for this banquet, this state banquet. We think since leaving the car, he's been going along a receiving line and introductions, and we're going to have a toast now inside the Great Hall. Let's return to Helen Ann Smith and James Matthews. And this is soft power on clear display, isn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And you can see the two leaders walking in there. There's some very key members of Xi Jinping's Politburo Standing Committee. That's the name of sort of his top team, if you like, who were kind of flanking him there. I think the man you can see in the back is actually a translator. But interesting, as I said earlier, we were going to watch that seating plan, and they are sat next to each other. I think that's sort of telling, and I think that's important. But look, yeah, we haven't had information about this yet, but those table decorations are fascinating and beautiful, and I'm sure they will be symbolic. It looks like it's a sort of a replica of the Temple of Heaven, which is this sort of very historic and beautiful landmark in southern Beijing, where Trump was taken today for a tour. It looks to me like what that is. So, yeah, I think soft power absolutely on show, James.
Yeah, and I'm interested that Marco Rubio is at the top table. Let's just have a listen just now.
Xi Jinping for President Donald J. Trump now begins.
首先，请习近平主席致辞。
Now a toast by President Xi.
尊敬的特朗普总统，女士们、先生们，很高兴为特朗普总统对中国进行国事访问举行国
Well,
宴。
Helen Ann, I'm not going to ask you to translate President Xi.
Yeah, I'm just listening in to see if a translation is going to be laid over the top. Sometimes it is. My Chinese is okay, James. It's not that good.
表示热烈欢迎。
Yeah, no translation apparently, Helen Ann. But
Honourable President,
I understood the top. He said, "Welcome, Donald Trump."
Welcome, Donald. Well, that's a
It is
start.
a great pleasure to host the state banquet in honour of President Trump during his state visit to China. On behalf of the Chinese government and people, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to President Trump and the U.S. delegation.
这是一次历史性访问。
So I think what's happening here is that Xi Jinping will speak in Chinese, and then there's going to be translation afterwards. So we started off with these opening remarks, of course, welcoming President Donald Trump to Beijing for this incredibly important meeting, historic meeting, he says, between the two heads of state. He's saying it's the beginning of China's new 5-year plan. We're saying the 5-year plan is quite an important political concept in China. They sort of release them every 5 years, as the name suggests, and it really lays out what China's priorities and focuses will be coming up. The most recent one really focused on tech, high-tech industries. That's, of course, an issue that we know the two men have been speaking about today. He mentioned in his speech as well that China has 1.4 billion people.
This year marks the start of China's 15th five-year plan for economic and social development. The over 1.4 billion people of China, drawing on the rich heritage of our over 5,000-year civilization, are advancing Chinese modernization on all fronts through high-quality development. This year is also the 250th anniversary of American independence. The over 300 million American people are reinvigorating the spirit of patriotism, innovation, and enterprise, and ushering in a new journey for the development of the United States. The people of China and the United States are both great peoples. Achieving the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation and making America great again can go hand in hand. We can help each other succeed and advance the well-being of the whole world.
55年前，尼克松总统派基辛格博士访华，中美开展乒乓外交，双方官民并举，推开了中美。
Yeah, 55 years ago, he's saying. President Nixon was in China. China and the US had ping-pong diplomacy, he says.
It's interesting he brings up President Nixon, actually, because that was the moment President Nixon, the president who first really recognized the communist government of China, a man who's still deeply respected and revered here in China, actually.
Many stories, he says, between China and the United States started at that point.
Richard Nixon sent Dr. Henry Kissinger to visit China, and ping-pong diplomacy was carried out between our two countries. Through efforts of the two governments and peoples, the door that had remained frozen for over 20 years was opened, marking a milestone in contemporary international relations. From then on, China and the United States have written many chapters of friendship through mutual openness and cooperation. Under the new situation, President Trump and I, fully aware of the expectations of our two nations and the international community, have had multiple meetings and phone calls and kept China-US relations generally stable.
今天，我同特朗普总统就中美关系和国际
Interesting he uses the words have kept the relationship generally stable. I think that is quite a good summary of where it's been. Tensions have been so high but haven't quite tipped over. He's going on to say that now, me and President Trump, following the new trend of time, have had many exchanges. I think they have both referred a few times over the day to the fact that they talk relatively frequently, despite all the difficulties between them. And I think that's all part of the sort of broadcasting of this picture of stability that's very important to both of them, that they can be seen as responsible superpowers.
In-depth exchanges on China-US relations and the international and regional dynamics. We both believe that the China-US relationship is the most important bilateral relationship in the world. We must make it work and never mess it up. Both China and the United States stand to gain from cooperation and lose from confrontation. Our two countries should be partners rather than rivals. President Trump and I also agreed to build a constructive China-US relationship of strategic stability to promote the steady, sound, and sustainable development of China-US relations and bring more peace, prosperity, and progress to the world.
尊敬的特朗普总统先生、女士们、先生们。
Interesting, again, this talk about we should be partners, not rivals. We should start a strategic partnership. Again, the Chinese have used that word strategic quite a lot. Yeah. Strategic stability they were talking about earlier.
That was the message at the opening of the negotiations today, this business of being partners, not rivals, emphasising that there is a mutual benefit in working together, but not necessarily on US terms alone. That's been the trouble between these two nations.
Yeah, and remember the subtext, of course, in everything that Xi Jinping says here is exactly that it is not on US terms, that they are equals, and that they should be working together. Trump, he says, ladies and gentlemen, the US-China history...
Ladies and gentlemen, friends, looking back at the course of China-US relations, whether or not we could have mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and win-win cooperation is the key to whether the relationship can advance steadily. The world today is changing and turbulent. China-US relations concern the well-being of the over 1.7 billion people of both countries and affect the interests of the over 8 billion people of the world. Both sides should rise up to this historic responsibility and steer the giant ship of China-US relations forward, steadily and in the right direction.
最后，我提议为中美两国发展繁荣和人民幸福。
He's making all the right noises, Helen, in terms of cooperation, strategic partnership. I suppose what's lacking, and what was lacking from the readouts from the US and China, is exactly how that is going to happen, the nuts and bolts. Perhaps not a surprise.
China and the United States and the well-being of our people, to the bright future of China-US relations and the friendship between the two peoples, and to the health of President Trump and all the friends present. Cheers.
干杯。
Cheers.
It's interesting, in that toast, he hit on themes that are certainly not unusual when you're accustomed to listening to sort of Chinese speeches. He really listened, he really lent into the bigger picture, the importance, the global importance of these two great superpowers managing their relationship responsibly. In that toast from Xi Jinping, nothing on the issues that truly divide them, but on the responsibility they have to work together.
It was a fantastic day. And in particular, I want to thank President Xi, my friend, for this magnificent welcome. And it really was a magnificent welcome like none other. And for so graciously hosting us on this very historic state visit. We had extremely positive and productive conversations and meetings today with the Chinese delegation earlier. And this evening is another cherished opportunity to discuss among friends some of the things that we discussed today, all good for the United States and for China. And it was a great honor to be with you. Please.
感谢习近平主席。今天我们度过了非常美好的一天。首先要感谢习近平主席这一盛大的欢迎。那么也非常感谢。
Well, Donald Trump continuing in the same vein as we heard this morning. Magnificent welcome like none other. He clearly appreciates the way that he's been welcomed to Beijing. Was asked a question about some of the subject matter, Taiwan, when he was at the tour of the temple this afternoon. Didn't give an answer to that. All he would say was that Beijing was a beautiful place. I wonder if he will touch on the nuts and bolts, the key subject areas, and address perhaps some of the more difficult,
between the American and Chinese people goes all the way back to America's founding. The first American consul to China, Samuel Shaw, arrived on the first American trading ship to reach these shores in 1784. The Chinese merchants had a name for the Americans. They called their visions the New People. 2.5 centuries later, that first connection has grown into one of the most consequential relationships in world history.
美国人民和中国人民之间的友谊可以追溯到
Donald Trump, Helen Ann, invoking the US. You know, Donald Trump invoking the US, a new country compared to China, an extremely old country. They recognise the difference here, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, China always talks about its 5,000 years of continuous history. The notion that this country might talk down to them with their
cannot
mere
walk.
250 years often draws a roll of the eyes here, that's for sure.
今天是一个当初的友谊，已经慢慢的演变成为当今世界当中最举足轻重的关系之一。
From the beginning, our citizens have shared a deep sense of mutual respect. Founding Father Benjamin Franklin published the sayings of Confucius in his colonial newspaper, and today's sculpture, recognizing that ancient Chinese sage, is carved into the face of the United States Supreme Court very proudly.
从一开始，我们两国之间的人民就已经有深厚的
US
相互
watchers, I wonder what they'll be thinking at that, Helen Ann. Donald Trump invoking the founding fathers for his Chinese audience. You know, a president who many, certainly his critics, would see as driving a coach and horses through the Constitution as laid down by the people who created the United States. I wonder if the irony will land with the Chinese, as it surely will with the American audience.
Ran in both directions. Chinese admirers of President George Washington gifted a stone tablet honoring his memory to adorn the Washington Monument. It bears the words of a Chinese official who called the great general and statesman a hero among men.
这一种欣赏是相互的。那么中国许多中
Well,
国
it's
人
interesting in the last little bit as well. He talked about Benjamin Franklin quoting Confucius, you know, the kind of renowned Chinese philosopher whose sort of ideas still dictate a lot about the Chinese respect for hierarchy and deference. Just such sort of subtle hints at all the themes and emotions that underpin this meeting.
将军和政治家，他们把它称为人中豪杰。
And across the centuries, this mutual esteem grew into a relationship that reflected the tremendous talent and potential of our two people. Chinese workers helped lay the railroad tracks that connected our Atlantic coast to the Pacific. American travelers to China helped spread literacy and modern medicine. And at the request of China's ambassador, it was President Theodore Roosevelt who provided the funds to establish President Xi's alma mater, Tsinghua University.
在过去几百年当中，这种相互的尊敬已经成为了一段全新的关系。
Emphasizing what unites these two countries. I do wonder about President Xi listening on to this. You know, okay, we're pals, we go way back. But why did you start a trade war with my country? Why have you tried to skewer us in over 2 terms in office?
I also don't think they're much going to like that comment that American missionaries came to China to, quote, spread literacy and modern medicine. Remember what I said about the 5,000 years of history? I don't think the Chinese will take all that kindly to the idea that Americans were spreading literacy here.
罗斯福总统也专门提供了资金，成立了习主席的母校清华大学。
As allies in World War II, President Franklin Roosevelt's mentions of the brave people of China, that's what they were, drew loud cheers in his speeches in the United States, and everybody loved what he had to say, just as many Chinese now love basketball and blue jeans. Chinese restaurants in America today outnumber the 5 largest fast food chains in the United States, all combined. That's a pretty big statement.
那么，作为2战期间的盟国，罗斯福总统在美国的多次
Well, there you go. The McDonald's, yeah, the McDonald's fan, hailing the number of Chinese restaurants that outnumber all the other fast food restaurants. Get your blue jeans and basketball here, making the cultural connections, I suppose, with modern America.
The irony is that there's been such a concerted effort in China to sort of de-Americanize some of those things in recent times.
That stretches back 250 years is the foundation for a future that benefits both of our nations. The American and Chinese people share much in common. We value hard work, we value courage and achievement, we love our families, and we love our countries. Together we have the chance to draw on these values to create a future of greater prosperity, cooperation, and happiness and peace for our children. We love our children. This region and the world, it's a special world with the two of us united and together.
那么至于商业当中的纽带以及我们的相互尊重，可以说追溯到
cooperation and happiness based on the love of our children. You know, an easy statement to make by Donald Trump, but I think the cooperation and happiness is a harder sell to that audience, particularly the man who sits at the top of the top table. Cooperation and happiness will need to be based on trade deals, on the politics of moving forward as superpowers who can make a connection, the kind of connection that they don't have currently because it's drifted apart largely on the initiative of the Americans.
Thank you again, President Xi, for this beautiful welcome. And tonight it is my honor to extend an invitation to you and Madam Peng to visit us at the White House this September 24th, and we look forward to it. And I'd now like to raise a glass and propose a toast to the rich and enduring ties between the American and Chinese people. It's a very special relationship, and I want to thank you again. This has been an amazing period of time. Thank you, President Xi.
那么再一次感谢习主席，感谢这一美好的欢迎。那么今天晚上，
It seems that they will meet again sooner rather than later, September the 24th.
Yeah.
Trump says, I extend the invitation to you and Madam Peng, which is Xi Jinping's wife, to visit the United States.
Yeah, this is a process, isn't it? I think we've had generalities today in terms of the summing up and the summit speak in terms of the American readouts, the Chinese readouts, generalities about where they go from here. Warm words that have been repeated here. It's a question of the detail.
感谢。
I think, James, you'll know better than me, but it feels that Donald Trump really stayed on script and on message there. And I think although neither of the leaders really said anything to reflect the vast differences that exist between them and the vast difficulties and the many thorny issues that I'm sure were discussed over the bilateral table. I think it's interesting that both of them chose to focus on what unites them. They chose to focus on the kind of the grand responsibility of managing that relationship. And I think from the Chinese perspective, that's important, having those moments to sort of state that importance and show the responsibility. They don't like sort of airing their dirty laundry in public, for want of a better metaphor. You know, they prefer to keep those thorny issues behind closed doors, and on those big important moments, they want these grand statements of, you know, togetherness and intent. And Donald Trump, of course, is slightly more likely to wheel off those scripts occasionally, and I think the Chinese might be a little relieved that in this case he didn't.
Yeah, I think that's the concern with many people when they look at Donald Trump, a man, you know, who's in there to preserve their interests. That's certainly the case in Taiwan, I think, which is emerging as the key issue of the day. In Taiwan, they will worry that this is a president, you know, who does his politics on instinct, who does freestyle, who is loose on detail, who doesn't get the subtleties of dealing with the Chinese, you know. And as you've been telling me for the past 48 hours on this trip, you know, the Chinese, they curate these things very carefully. Every word it's all very surgical, you know, very tightly scripted. It's all about minor shifts in position and the nuance of politics. With Donald Trump, It's the broad-brushed stuff. And, you know, he's not a man with an eye for the detail that matters on so many subject areas when it comes to dealing with the Chinese, particularly on Taiwan. As you said, Helen Ann, it's all about incremental shifts. And the Chinese, they don't want to, or they do want to actually change the starting line for discussions moving forward. They think with Donald Trump, they have a good chance of doing that.
And the other thing I think that's worth pointing out that we learnt in that toast or in those speeches that really helped the Chinese in that campaign is how soon they're going to meet again. The end of September, apparently, Donald Trump is inviting Xi Jinping and his wife over to Washington, D.C. That's only in a couple of months' time. And, you know, that's also part of this Chinese campaign, particularly on Taiwan, is that regular meetings, bring it up regularly, continue to chip away, continue to sort of nudge the dial. So I think certainly in terms of Taiwan, that's relevant as well.
Yeah, September the 24th. There goes my trip back home for my birthday. Unless you want to come over to DC for cover.
I'll celebrate it with you, James. I'll celebrate it with you.
Thanks, Helen Ann. There you go. Donald Trump and President Xi. Back now to you in the studio.
OK, James, we'll all join you for a cup of tea. Thanks very much.